Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. The show is produced and broadcast from the Portland, Oregon, USA metropolitan area. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about tonight. And I always stumble over this canned speech because for some reason or other I'm so used to it, I stumble. Well, my guest this evening is Dr. Rick Stagenborg, psychiatrist, personal friend of mine, and other things I can say about him, but not over the air, okay? How you feeling, buddy?
Not too bad, Don. Thanks for having me on.
Good to see you. What is this, the 6th or 13th time you've been on?
I haven't counted.
Because you're so darn smart in politics and political and social issues and justice issues, and because you're just fun to be with.
Thanks. I enjoy being on.
Yeah. And I'm feeling good now that I've seen you and looking you right in the eyeball and considering what's going to go on in the next hour. I don't know what to expect because usually I have a pretty good idea what's going to go on, but then you always surprise me. And sometimes I've got to be provocative and be the other side deliberately so that we can have a fight.
Good luck. Good luck on this one.
Because you can read me, huh? All
Just
right.
given the topic.
Yeah. And each Conversations with Dr. Don show consists of two major segments. In the first segment, the Who Are You segment, I talk with my guest a little about who they are personally so that we might get a bit of an appreciation of why they say what they say during the show. In the second segment, we'll talk about the title of the show, under Trump, what is going to be, what is America going to be like? Yeah. Remember that? Yeah. America's Future Under Trump. I almost forgot the title of your show. You ready?
Yep.
If I asked your best friend, who is Rick? Who is Rick Stagenborg? What was your best friend? Be your best friend. Rick is what?
He's a good guy.
Oh.
Cares about people.
Yeah. Okay.
He was a good shrink.
Uh-huh. You said was a good shrink.
Yeah. I'm a retired psychotherapist.
Oh,
psychiatrist.
Okay. Yeah. And when and where are you born?
Portland.
You're a native.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I don't see any.
Does that surprise you?
You ready for your other trick question?
Sure.
You're not so sure about that.
Depends. Is it a new one?
No, it's the same old one. Why were you born, Rick?
Why was I born? You know, I don't know. I think it was an accident, Don. Started back when there was only void, and then there was a big bang, and then there was me eventually.
Can't we even get started without you getting smart?
You started it.
Yeah. Hey, anything significant about your racial or national or cultural heritage worth telling viewers about?
Nothing. I don't think that really influences how I think about things, particularly. I'm a little on the German side.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Because you're a Trump supporter, so I can do that in your presence, right?
No, I'm a little on the German side, and I'm a little, how do I put it nicely? I don't know.
That's hard for you, putting something nice.
I have an obsessive concern for order without being necessarily OCD, but then all doctors do.
Yeah. I'm just a psychologist, so I'm not as afflicted as you are. Do you have a religious preference nowadays, Rick?
No.
Did you ever have one?
No.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised in the Catholic Church, so I was 10 years old, but that wasn't my preference. When I was told I had a choice, I walked away. And, stayed away from church for 50 years. And now I go occasionally to Christian church, but it's not because I'm religious.
Did you ever study any Latin?
No, not formally.
Do you have a hole in your chest like me from too many mea culpas?
No,
when you heard
no,
that.
actually, I don't have that many. I probably should have a few more mea culpas than I've admitted to.
Yeah, I got a whole bunch. Never mind, let's not go there. And we know about your MD psychiatrist, among other things. Any other comments you can make about your formal education that would be of interest to the viewers?
I have a background in psychology and biology as well as medicine. Mm-hmm. Mostly self-taught when it comes to the kind of things we're talking about here in politics.
How did you arrive at being a pursuer of justice? How did that happen?
I was born that way, I think. Far back as I can remember, I used to just get infuriated, really. I mean, literally infuriated when there was a gross injustice right in front of me. Of course, like most people, I didn't learn about a lot of the injustice that's going on in the world until I was an adult, and not a lot of it just in the last half dozen years, really. My eyes were opened.
We'll get into that, how your eyes got opened, where you can see injustice more clearly now than you did before. But boy. How about other education, other than formal education, School of Hard Knocks or anything like that?
Well, I'm a dad and a granddad. That probably makes me more sensitive to other people's suffering, but I think probably my work as a psychiatrist too had a lot to do with that, psychotherapist. But I was always that way. I was always empathetic, so injustice has always upset me.
Are you still empathetic?
I like to think so.
Yeah.
I'm a little less so. I had to, as a doctor, you have to learn to temper that.
Of course.
But actually getting into politics has made me work on that even more. I use politics, a very global term.
Yes.
I mean, looking at the way the world is, I had to become even more, had to tamper down my empathy dial a little bit more, because I'm very concerned for the way things are going. I mean, I can't overstate how concerned I am.
Okay. And for me, I need to be sure I don't get too far into being empathetic, because my brain is occupied with feeling for you, sitting across from me here. But anyhow, this is your story.
So you know what I'm talking about.
I know.
I'm okay, Don.
Yeah. And since you're retired, what are you doing now with your time?
Well, I'm just doing a lot of trying to keep up on things. It's been a little harder. I've had some medical problems, but I'm still doing my best to try to keep up on things, especially international issues, which is why when you asked if I wanted to talk about Trump, I wanted to focus mostly on the international issues, because I'm doing a little better keeping up on that, but because of my medical problems, not quite as well versed as I should be on all the other ins and outs of the Trump administration and what's going on.
Would it be useful for the viewers to get an idea what you mean by recent medical problems, or should we just keep going?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's just limited. I get fatigued a lot easier than I used to. That's all.
Okay. And you got a partner anymore? A boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband,
I
a
have
wife,
a
or whatever?
wife and 2 puppies.
2 puppies. What's their name?
They'll always be my puppies, no matter how old they get. Lacey and Cody.
And politically, on the continuum, were you left to right or center or over the edge?
I'm radically centrist.
Radical centrist. What the hell are you talking about? Oh, pardon me. This is a family show.
I don't know. That's a term that one of your other guests used one time. I loved it. To me, it just means that I try to look at things from both sides, and I really don't give a crap what anybody says that the 2 sides are. I decide what the 2 extremes are and where the truth is in the middle.
I've looked at life from both sides now.
Love that song.
Give and take.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you
So
live
people
with-
think I'm crazy. They'll call me a right winger. They'll call me a radical left winger, depending on the topic, because I don't agree with the assumptions that people make. People who call themselves liberals and conservatives. I like to think I'm neither.
And as I mentioned, some people that we'll be talking about in the second half of the show, and we'll see how you feel about them, and then we'll have a better idea where you are, really.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, right.
Just don't label me.
God, can't even have some way of describing a human being without being accused of labeling them?
I'm a nice guy. My best friend is call me a nice guy.
That's for sure. I love that. That's better. Is that a label?
I think if we all try to be nice people, that's a label we can all live with.
Can we get into the second half of the show before we get in a fight?
Sure.
The difference between empathy and sympathy and compassion, those three terms, we should know about those.
Sure.
Sympathy, empathy, and compassion.
Well, I'm not sure there's a huge, the way I use the terms, a huge difference between empathy and compassion. To me, they're pretty much synonymous. Sympathy is different, though. Sympathy is where you are feeling what somebody else is feeling. And the problem there is, as you said, you can get lost and forget to think. I mean, like, for instance, as a therapist, if you're trying to help someone, you don't want to be sympathetic. You don't want to get lost in their emotions if they're severely depressed or whatever. So empathy is different. That's being attuned to somebody else's emotional state and being able to recognize what it is and let that resonate within you enough where you share something with them without becoming overwhelmed by their emotion.
And that's when the balancing act comes into play.
Right.
As a strength,
That's empathy.
Yeah.
And we all have compassion, which I suppose you could say is a capacity for either one. Yeah. I guess maybe that's the difference.
Do you have compassion for Trump? No, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, I do. I mean,
it's kind of hard
if somebody would, walk up and beat the crud out of him for saying something I agree with, I would say, wow, glad that didn't happen to me. And there are things that Trump says that I agree with.
Yeah.
There's things that Trump says that a lot of people agree with who you wouldn't think of as alt-right or, fascist.
Labeling.
There you go. Exactly.
Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations, you belong to any of that stuff anymore?
Well, yeah.
You ran for the Senate, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
And how long ago was that?
2010.
How'd you do?
About as well as could be expected for a third-party candidate nobody ever heard of.
Okay, we'll let that go.
I maintained ballot status for our party. Or I wasn't the only one that got over the 1%, but I did. I got rounded off to 1%.
And what was the party?
It was a progressive party.
Progressive Party, yes. Our Progressive Party, yes. Okay, any persons from the past that you particularly liked or admired are alive today? Any names come to mind?
Yeah, my dad.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
How come? How come you admired him or looked up to him?
Well, he taught me that compassionate conservatism is a real thing.
The people who call themselves compassionate conservatives
no, most of them who call themselves aren't.
Oh,
just like there are what I would consider real Christians who, have some consistent philosophy they call Christianity, and then most people call themselves Christians. Who I wouldn't do them the.
Yeah.
I wouldn't give them that courtesy.
If Christ were to come back today, if that were possible, what would he say when he looks at all the people who call themselves Christians?
Boy, I don't know. Excuse me, but that Jethro Tull song comes to mind.
What's that?
Oh, I wish I could remember. Hymn 43, the gory glory seekers who would use his name in vain. That line in particular. It's just, you know.
We got to send you back to catechism. You should remember that stuff.
I can sing the song, but I'm not going to do it on camera.
Come on. Yeah. And who else besides your dad? Any other names come to mind?
Well, lots of people. I mean, I just have lots of influences.
I'm
not into hero worship, though. You know, I mean,
yeah.
There are a lot of people I admire, but
yeah.
I can't think of anybody who's faultless.
I don't think I want to worship anybody.
Well,
there are some people who do heroic things, though.
Yeah, well, I guess the reason that I shy away from it and make a point of mentioning it is because there's so many people who are unwilling to criticize their heroes, and it's a huge problem. I mean, Bernie Sanders is not perfect, for instance. Chris Hedges is not perfect. All these icons are not perfect. I disagree with them strenuously on some things, and we should be able to do that.
Even Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, and you know, when it starts with not being able to disagree with Bernie Sanders, next thing you know, you're agreeing with anything Hillary says.
Don't go that far.
It has gone that far. That's how come she almost won the nomination. And was ultimately awarded it. Or one of the reasons she was ultimately awarded.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating.
Yes,
slightly.
Any persons from history, in recent history, that you particularly disliked?
I wasn't a big fan of George Bush, second, in particular.
How come?
Well, he got us started on, you know, these wars in the Mideast.
Yeah.
Well, his dad did actually, but he actually went so far as to actually invade two different countries. That's beyond the pale.
Yeah.
But I wasn't all that fond of Obama either. I mean, in terms of his foreign policy.
I've been going kind of back and forth in recent months, or a couple of years or so, maybe recent months, about Obama and about the things I would have liked him to address more seriously. But then considering any possibility of success with a few things that seemed at this moment unreasonable, considering the people he's surrounded with and the people who are in his cabinet. And, no, I'm getting off and talking about my stuff. Let's stick with yours.
He picked those people in his cabinet. So as far as, I mean, there's a lot of things that it would have been nice if he'd pushed for in terms of a domestic agenda, but you're right, he can't do that on his own. That's Congress's job, and thank God, because they'll stop some of the things Trump probably would like to do. But when it comes to foreign policy, that's something the president has almost exclusive control over. Regardless of how many influences there are trying to push him one way or the other, he's still the decider.
Foreign policy. Oh, I will wait a few months and get a better idea of what the Trump people are going to have by way of foreign policy.
Well, we have a lot of hints, and that's what's interesting to me. And the one thing that there's a ray of hope, a faint ray, that things could be better.
It's going to be pretty hard to give me a reason to hope, huh?
We'll get into an argument.
All right. Okay, what do you think
we
of
have to.
The mainstream media? Is it centrist or right or what? The corporate media.
It's corporatist.
Is that good or bad?
It's bad. That's real bad.
What's most important nowadays on the political scene to pay attention to nowadays? What's most important to?
Same thing I've been saying since the first time I was on here, corruption. None of this is going to change until we address that, the way we elect our people for federal office.
The way we elect, is there a better way of electing than we do now?
Yeah, there's a lot of things we could do differently. We could have a national popular vote, for one thing, for president. We could have...
so it sounds more like democracy, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, we could have ranked choice voting, which they're trying to do here in Oregon now.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I don't know why I keep... Haven't smoked for quite some time now. It's been 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, the ranked choice voting is another thing. The most important thing, though, is campaign finance reform as far as how we elect people.
The money out of the political process.
Right.
All right. So how about we take a break now so you can get a good coffee in,
Okay.
drink some water, and then we'll come back and talk about America's future under Trump. That's a scary title. Okay, Mr. E, can we take a break? Now, you were going to say something about your daughter coming home from church, but hold on a second. Let me reintroduce the show to the viewers who tuned in late. If you missed the opening of the show, you're watching Conversations with Dr. Don. It's an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like my guest here about who he is, and you've heard about that in the first half of the show. And then we're going to be talking about America's future under Trump, and that's a big, big subject, so we better get started on that. And you were saying something about your daughter.
Well, you had a sign showing to the viewers saying, be kind even to unkind people, they need it the most.
Yes.
It just reminded me of something my daughter told me. She came home from church one day and said, I learned the neatest thing today. The pastor said, you should look at every person that you see as they walk by and try to find a reason to love them. And I thought, wow, how powerful that is. And so I try to practice that when I think about it. You know, we all forget things like that. But, you know, the ultimate, I told people every time I tell them the story, I'd say the ultimate test is when you can do that with Dick Cheney. And now, of course, you can substitute Donald Trump for that. And you can think about all the stuff Donald Trump is doing and still feel compassion for him as a human being, then you got the message.
As you're saying that, I'm turning that on and having a hard time getting it energized.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But it's important, really, very seriously, when you're talking about these things, because if we're going to do anything about it, we need to learn to come together, obviously. Yeah. And you can talk about that all you want, but as long as you make politics out to be a war between the us's and the thems, you're going about it all wrong. There is only us, at least 99% of us. Them is a very small group of people. It's not everybody who believes this or everybody who believes that. It's not that simple. You know, very good people believe some things that I strongly think are wrong. But somehow we got to get past that and talk to each other. And I think when we do that, I know that when we do that, that we find out that we have important things in common, and we start moving closer to the truth, both of us do, to some common understanding of what's real, what's right.
Do you visit with people voluntarily in public places like the supermarket or something like that?
You think? Yes, I do.
I know you do. Do they enjoy you as much as I do?
Well, again, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, you can call me, I said I was OCD. The truth is, I think that there's a moral decision in nearly everything we do.
Of course.
And there's a moral reason to want to talk to strangers. Not just to make their day feel better, which is good enough reason. Mm-hmm. It's not just to correct them when they're wrong, which is not as good a reason because it doesn't very often work. But to get a conversation going, to make people know it's okay to talk about things that might be controversial. I mean, you can read a headline off of the not newspaper, off, I guess, the Inquirer or something, while you're waiting in line at the store. I do this. I'll pick something, you know, not space aliens.
Why not?
It's something about some popular figure, and I'll make something out of it. Like, you know, gosh, isn't it terrible that people believe that kind of stuff about people so easily? And next thing you know, we're talking about the reality of this, I don't know, political figure or whatever, and something they said or did. But we're talking about politics, ultimately. We may be talking about war. You'd be amazed how quickly I can steer people into talking about why we really have wars and what's really going on in places like Syria and Ukraine. You'd be amazed. People on the phone, you know, call me about my credit card bill or whatever. I mean, I do it every day, and I think everybody should. If we all did, then we might be able to have a chance at a functioning democracy.
It starts on an individual level, though.
It does. And, you know, letters to the editor, I say this all the time. Letters to the editor are so easy to write. Most papers will allow you to print up to one a month of your letters. Some much more often than that. And let people know what you think. And that's a great way, because you get a letter to the editor printed and thousands of people know what you think. But you don't take that opportunity just to slam other people. All you're doing is you're part of the problem. You're dividing people. You should use that as an opportunity to present ideas in a way that they're potentially acceptable to just about anybody. I mean, I write stuff that some people would consider radical if they understood all the implications of the things I write. But I rarely get any feedback. I mean, any negative feedback in follow-up letters to the editor, because I try to stick to the facts, and the interpretations that I make are pretty cut and dried. I mean, they're pretty hard to refute based on the facts that I cite. If you write letters like that and you're really careful, I mean, it takes practice.
And for me, that's not really as important as face-to-face, eyeball to eyeball, and listening to what each other says and recognizing what's going on with you as you say one thing and I'm recognizing something else that's going on, and you know what I'm talking about.
Well, ultimately, that is the most important. I mean, but if you're trying to reach a lot of people at once.
Of course.
So that's why I think both of them are very important. I don't, neither one alone is enough.
Okay, shall we go to your questions?
Sure.
We have some questions that we talked about we might ask and see what happens. And there was one question here, the first one, and I was reading it and I thought, he couldn't have meant that question, and sure enough he didn't. So we rephrased that question to now. I won't talk about what it was.
Good.
What was your reaction when Trump was elected? What was your reaction?
Well, it was shock first, I think, like most people, except for perhaps the people that made it happen. But in a way, I guess in a way, I know what I meant when I said relief.
You felt relief when he was...
In a sense. I mean, it's really kind of hard to find a good word for what I felt. I really didn't want Clinton to be elected, but that didn't mean I wanted Trump to be elected either. I guess when the relief came from, wow, you know, I guess now we find out what happens when you don't vote for the lesser of two evils every time. I mean, I guess you could say that's what happened when Bush got elected, but I think maybe it was a lot less obvious to people what Bush was than what now. What it's pretty obvious what Trump is, and he got elected anyway. Mm-hmm. Because we finally rejected, you know, the Democrats giving us somebody who represents the culmination of 30 years of building corruption in the system. That it didn't just happen. It happened step by step. Have you heard of the concept of normalization of deviance?
Normalization of deviance, yes, I think I have.
Yeah, maybe some of your listeners haven't. But it just means that once you start cheating, once you break the rules, the moral boundaries a little bit, then that becomes the new normal.
Depending on the acceptance of the populace.
Well, this unfortunately seems to be a pretty universal tendency.
Anymore, huh?
It didn't used to be, you're right, it didn't used to be. But, you know, it's this way in business, it's this way in government. And people don't expect any different. People need to expect more. I mean, that's what drove me. As I said, I kind of had an awakening in 2010. That's what drove me, and to just, I was all over the place. You know me. I was literally traveling all over the country, mm-hmm. trying to make connections, meet people, get their ear, learn from them, and try to give them some of my ideas, and you know, just kind of frantically trying to do something, because I hadn't realized how bad it was until I saw what the Democrats were presenting as reform of a very serious problem, you know, the lack of health care. What they were clearly doing, as far as I was concerned, from the beginning, in early 2009, when Chuck Schumer said that the public option that they had in mind was not going to compete with private insurance. Well, it was obvious. This is not going to lead to single payer. This is not a first step to single payer. It's a way to keep us from having to talk about single payer, to keep a system alive that was so broken that it was going to go broke on its own. And the only way out of it was to bail it out with taxpayer money. And that, voila, there's Obamacare. It's a bailout. I knew this. Don, did you ever see my RV that I bought and put stickers on that said, single payer now, stop the bailout in 2009? Mm-hmm. Well, now people are seeing that that's all it was. You know, so I'm not trying to say that I can predict the future, but in this case, to me it was very obvious, and the ultimate problem was corruption. And that's why I very early on started focusing on this campaign finance reform. Mm-hmm. Because nothing's going to change. That's what we can expect from both parties until we do something about it. And the only thing that we can ultimately do about it is elect people who we can expect to be accountable and who are going to do something about the corruption. Well, we had a perfect chance with Bernie Sanders was running on a campaign of cleaning up Washington, and he had a record that showed he meant it. Mm-hmm. And yet, enough Democrats voted for Clinton that they were able to, you know, finagle a victory for her in the primary. If we had
a fair election, halfway fair election, then Bernie would have beat Trump.
Easily, yeah. And so that's what I meant by relieved. That's my long explanation for that bizarre statement I made. It's not like, wow, I can hardly wait, but it's like, okay, no more wondering. Mm-hmm. Now we get to find out what happens. Are people finally going to stand up or not? Because if we don't stand up in droves every day, we can expect, well, you said it when we were talking before the show, a police state. Mm-hmm.
Are we approaching a police state now?
Well, during the Bush and Obama administrations, they put in all the machinery that they need. All they have to do is put it into action.
We have the generals now who are going to be running the country.
That's
generals are billionaires.
Yeah, just
like,
the
same thing?
Yeah, General Haig just jumped the gun a little bit. now generals really are going to run the country.
And martial law?
It's a distinct possibility. Even mainstream figures like Tom Hartman, Ellen Brown from Public Banking Institute have talked about the collapse of the economy being as early as, well, Tom wrote a book saying it was going to be this year.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been. Maybe, I suppose in the next couple of weeks it could happen, but you know, the dollar could collapse and there would be chaos. Ellen Brown has written about it in detail in a couple of articles. Well, not a lot of detail. There are articles. You can write books about what it means. But the economy could collapse. That could happen at any time, and it could happen very rapidly. I
think that's possible nowadays.
Absolutely. I mean, the way Ellen Brown writes about it, it has to do with the amount of money that's in derivatives now being several times higher than it was in 2008.
Say a few words about Ellen Brown.
Ellen Brown is, she's a lawyer, not an economist, which adds to her credibility, because I don't trust most economists. Most economists are full of crap.
Milton Friedman, is that why?
Well, he's just one of them. I mean, most economists, Paul Krugman makes me want to vomit. He used to say what he thought, and now he says what he's paid to say. But anyway, I don't want to get too much into that, or personalities in particular. But Ellen Brown is not an economist. She's not trained to be an economist. But she's studied it on her own, and she's written a lot. She's written a couple of books. Web of Debt. You've talked to David Delk on this show about it. Web of Debt and the Public Bank Solution. She's some kind of officer, I believe, in the Public Banking Institute out of San Francisco.
So she's credible.
She's very credible, and yeah, and she says that the notional value of the derivatives, and don't ask me to define notional value, but it has something to do with, it's like derivatives aren't real money, of course. They don't have anything behind them. It's a bet that something's going to go up or down, and so, you know, they're frequently purchased on margin, meaning basically they're making a bet on a bet. Betting with borrowed money.
Why does that system exist?
Because it can, and because greed has been completely
greed!
unchecked.
Oh, there's greed behind all of this, huh?
Well, you can't do anything about greed, but the problem is there's no regulation. I mean, when derivatives were invented, Congress asked Friedman, Alan Greenspan, whether he thought they should be regulated or not, and he's like, no, the mighty invisible hand will regulate them. Yeah, exactly. So, so it's a system that's completely out of control, and here's the bottom line. Because these are bets with borrowed money, that frequently are his bets for borrowed money. This is all money that just exists on computers. There's many times the world GDP, the amount of products and services produced in a year in the entire world, multiple of several times that in value of these derivatives, if they could all be paid off. But of course they can't.
But they can't.
They can't be. So, so if something starts to collapse and somebody has to start making payments on their bet on these derivatives, and they can't, and that collapses, then that starts a whole pyramid of collapsing. It's the same thing that happened in 1929, And it's the same thing that happened in 2008.
But it's so convoluted and confusing until when people examine it very closely, they can't figure out what the hell is going on.
Well, they're not going to figure it out until it happens, most people. We can talk about this, but people aren't going to believe it till it happens.
And it can happen again.
It has never happened. I mean, not to the extent that it's going to happen. I'm talking about the dollar collapsing.
Okay, we better move on to the next question, I think, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, we?
Yeah, let's not talk about something that down, Don. Let's talk about climate change.
Okay.
No, let's not. Let's talk about Donald's foreign policy. There may be some hope there.
All right. You want to talk about his foreign policy, or shall we go into something else?
Yeah, I probably should say something about climate change since I brought it up.
Okay.
I said that a police state is very plausible. One way or the other, I think we're going to end up with one if we don't get out on the street and force the issue.
Get out on the street. You know what you're saying?
Yes. Get out on the street, peacefully demonstrating every day, getting our heads beat in, literally, until more people start joining us because they see what's happening. They aren't going to see what's happening until we let our heads get beat in.
Yeah.
This is the way it always happens.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever won their freedom without getting their heads beat in.
So somehow or other you need to shut down the money earning capability of the super rich such that they bend or accommodate a little bit for the ordinary citizens.
I don't know how we're going to rescue the global economic system. The only way that I can think of is to just liquidate the debt that most of the, well, it is debt. Money is mostly debt. Sure. Liquidate most of the assets of the rich. I think that's about the only way that we could deal with it and start over or reallocate.
I made
literally redistribute.
I made a sign that I wore for a while. Didn't get too much reaction. Peace through worldwide wealth control. And a lot of people didn't think it was funny. Well, I think it's a great idea.
People are, people don't want, nobody likes change. I mean, for the sake of change. People want things to be better, but not if you have to change. Take it from a psychotherapist, Don. You know what I'm talking about.
I believe I do.
And when you're talking about changing from capitalism to something else,
come on,
you better
spit
believe.
It out. From capitalism to something else. What do you mean by something else?
I don't know for sure. There's a lot of options.
There's no name for what the other options are?
There's more than one option.
How about socialism, Rick?
Well, socialism has its problems also.
Not the communism practiced by Joe Stalin, but socialism, like in the Nordic countries.
We need to listen to the conservatives too. They're right that there's serious problems with those systems.
But people who are calling themselves conservatives now are not conservatives. We've got to be careful now. We're talking about a good language for a while ago, and now it means something entirely different.
Well,
and I'm nitpicking now. Let me stop.
No, that's a very good point, actually. We need to be careful how we use those terms. I'm saying that people who have, we all have a conservative impulse. We're all afraid of change.
Yeah.
To some extent. Some of us aren't very afraid of it. I'm not very afraid of it. As long as we're being careful. But that's the question. What's careful? How careful do you need to be? Do you sometimes need radical changes in order to correct something that's terribly, terribly wrong?
Yeah.
So liberals would say yes, yes, yes to all those things. Progressives, yes, 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 yes. So right now, I would say that's true. I would say that we need to make some radical changes. But a lot of those would be radical changes back to the center that we used to have. So they're conservative. But people who call themselves conservatives would disagree because a lot of them, most of them, have been trained to believe in things like the free market as if it really exists. And so they They make decisions about what's right and what's wrong in terms of the economy, not realizing that the assumptions for a free market economy have not been met and never have been and never will be, especially as long as we don't deal with the problem of corruption. This is why I say, let's go back to the beginning. It's the corruption, stupid. Let's work together on that. I don't care if you call yourself a conservative or a liberal or whatever, as long as we agree that Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were the worst two presidential candidates ever, and let's figure out what went wrong and what we're going to do about it. Obviously, things are out of control, and we need to, in order to bring them into control, we need to do something to seriously upset equilibrium. We're going to fight that conservative in a nice, in a universal sense, that conservative impulse. We have to fight that because right now we have to do something radical in order to reinstate traditional American values, what we were taught.
What is Trump doing?
Not necessarily the way that America worked, but the way
Trump is saying what you're just saying now. He is offering the kind of change to make America great again.
No, he's only saying that. He's not saying what that means.
What do you think it means to him?
I don't know. Yeah, he's not rational. I mean, he is rational in a sense, but he thinks so simplistically that he very quickly gets caught up in logical inconsistencies. He's not logical, I guess is a better way to put it.
When's the last time you had DSM-5 and examined personality disorders, narcissistic personality?
Oh, it's been a while. I worked with veterans.
Classic. He's a guy that's classic, huh?
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much, yeah. He goes into a rage when he's challenged, and he's always has to be right. And he's
isn't he a master of empathy?
Has no empathy. Yeah, you can list it. I can't list the criteria anymore. It's been too long.
Of course, yeah. We're back to the book again. How did the neocons get control? Would that be too big a question to ask at this point in time? We've only got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, well, when you first contacted me, I had a little more hope about Trump's foreign policy because he had talked about wanting to end regime change. He had talked about what is the purpose of NATO? Why do we still have NATO when there's no Soviet Union? Why don't Democrats ever ask these questions? I mean, these are questions like the emperor had no clothes, you know?
So he's got good questions, huh? It's what his answers are the problem.
Well, we don't know what his answers are yet, so we have to go by indirect evidence. Now, I gave several examples early on when you first contacted me of some positive signs that had occurred up to that point. For instance, Flynn, for all his faults, I mean, apparently he is an Islamophobe. He makes a lot of Islamophobic statements. But on the other hand...
What's his cabinet post is?
Oh, Flynn is not actually a cabinet post, but he'd be in a very important position as National Security Advisor.
Yes. Oh, yes.
He doesn't need to be confirmed, so he's definitely going to be at Trump's ear. Flynn has some very good points, which is one reason why they're trying to make him sound so terrible. I mean, apparently, the consensus is he wasn't a great manager. He may be a terrible manager. He's been accused of making up his own facts and not being particularly good at analysis. On the other hand, somehow he ended up at the top of the heap in the Defense Intelligence Agency, where he was in charge when a report was produced predicting the rise of some sort of an Islamic caliphate in the Mideast as a result of everything that was going on in 2012. And you may recall that ISIS didn't actually come over the dunes until 2014, so that was pretty prescient, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they noted in this report that this is exactly what the countries behind the coalition wanted. That this
I
would,
like that term, coalition.
Yeah, this would be to their benefit, and they wanted it. This was in 2012. Well, you know, then he started getting a lot of criticism because he was a hawk on Iran, and or at least that's what we're told was the big issue, that and his management style. So they forced him out, and after he got out, he was very vocal about his criticism, and he talked about this report in a number of venues, including RT. In fact, he did a paid interview on RT, which
RT said, what's RT?
Russia Today.
Russia Today, okay.
The propaganda station, supposedly. CNN has a lot of calls calling anybody a propaganda station.
I like that.
But anyway, I mean, RT is really a much more accurate source of information than CNN.
Really?
Yeah, for anybody that might not be aware of that already, or any other mainstream source, including MSNBC.
What do you think
or
about...
even Fox.
What do you think about, we're running out of time, that's why I'm going fast now. What do you think about the embrace of Donald Trump and Putin, how they love each other?
I think it's great. And that was the other thing I was going to say, is that, that I get them a little confused. There's all these generals now, but I believe Flynn and Mattis, DOD chief, are both in favor of working with Putin, which is, you know, we say Putin. It's not about personalities. It's about working with Russia. Russia is in Syria at the invitation of the Syrian government, which is legal.
And why is that?
To help defend them against the terrorists who the U.S. and the Saudis and Israel and Turkey are supporting.
That's a coalition of the willing.
Well, it's a proxy war, is what it is.
Yes.
And it's not, you know, it's not Shia versus Sunni. You know, that's nonsense in Syria. The Shia are a small sect in Syria. They get along with the Sunni. They have to. I mean, there's an accommodation the way they share power. It's complicated, but nonetheless, it works for them. We had no right to go in and try to take over their country. Assad is not primarily responsible for the deaths there. We are. We are, because if we hadn't supported, there was a small uprisings going on. They quickly turned violent, contrary to rumor. It wasn't just, you know, violent suppression.
Did they turn violent,
the demonstrators had arms to begin with. I mean, they didn't come out shooting, but it wasn't very long before they started killing off soldiers and stuff who were responding, and police, really right from the beginning. I mean, it was a setup. These were right on, this happened right on the Jordanian border, where the violence really broke out, where the weapons were coming in. And I know people in Syria who've told me that they were aware of weapons caches that were there. You know, they became aware of them after all this started, that they'd been in place before this. And we know now that the French foreign minister, for instance, was approached, I think it was 2008, about whether they'd want to take part in a coup in Syria by MI6, the British intelligence. And the U.S. was doing things that we were talking about, overthrowing Syria. Seymour Hersh's article, The Redirection, in 2007, makes mention of preparations to, you know, deal with Syria, because they were a key linchpin of the Shia arc that Israel wanted to eliminate.
What's going to happen in that part of the world now? We've got only a minute or so left.
We don't know. That's the one place, however, where we may see some change. If I mean, I could go into quite a bit of depth if we had time, but Obama's had the chance all along to pull out, and instead he just ordered more arms. We just authorized man-pads, shoulder-held surface-to-air missiles. It's crazy because The battle's already lost. I mean, once Aleppo falls completely.
We got to stop. One more question. One more question.
Okay.
America's future under Trump. You got about a minute or so to give me what America's future is under Trump. What is America's future under Trump, Rick?
That's up to us entirely.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he could be the best thing that ever happened to us because he finally forced us to face what we've been refusing to face. You know, what America's become and what we have to do to fix it.
Uh-huh.
Or he'll be like Nero, fiddling while Rome burns.
So we have to take to the streets, as we always have, for major radical change.
Every day, not just oh, let's have a demonstration in January, or no, we're busy, let's have one in March. No bullshit, we'll have one every day, and let's have tens of thousands maybe in the specially arranged.
I'm going to make some more signs, and I'm going to get out and march some more here in Portland too, and any place else where I can go out and march.
Look what happened in Korea. It wasn't in the news much, but.
Mr. E, do you have a couple of public service announcements before we keep going too long? Okay, I want to get my show, go to the local broadcast schedule, go to my website, www.donbam.com, and click on President Activities. Oh, the ACLU. Heavens, I'm so glad to see the sign for the ACLU. American Civil Liberties Union, our civil liberties are going down the tubes even faster than they were before. So we got to join the ACLU. And to get my shows broadcast by other stations, ask your local public access station to go to www.pegmedia.org and follow the instructions there. We got to end corporate personhood for sure. Go to movetoamend.org. Amend the Constitution to say that corporations are not persons and money is not speech. Thanks for watching. Remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. John's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable to you too, and you too, and you too, especially you, Rick. Thanks for coming in again, buddy, okay?
My pleasure always.
We'll see you next time.